Hey there, you silly fucks. So I wanted to, basically want to do this for a long time, just do a little crash course intro to geology, just so some of you have an idea what the fuck I'm talking about when I'm out in the middle of nowhere, referring to rocks as extrusive igneous or intrusive igneous or metamorphic, or talking about plate tectonics or any of that shit, just so you're maybe a little less clueless. Now, I'm not a geologist. I've got just a fart's whiff of an understanding of it, just enough to basically wet my palate. It's kind of gross if you're talking about farts. Forget that analogy, but just enough to wet my palate, to get me excited about it. Mostly in the ways in which it pertains to plants and plant speciation and plant distribution, little area of study called biogeography, shit like that. Why plants occur where they do, which basically has to do, in a lot of cases, with plate tectonics. I want you to learn this stuff. You might not like this again. My delivery might be a little off. Some people complain that I curse too much. They can go fuck themselves. I don't really care. I just want you to learn, okay? You might think I'm an asshole. That's fine too. Go ahead, unsubscribe. I don't give a shit. I just want you to learn this stuff. I think it's going to make you humble and in all the world again. I think learning about geology is going to fuck up your reality in the most beautiful of ways. Some of you might go to bed thinking about this stuff. You might go to bed thinking about the Mesozoic era, and what the forests look like then. You might be thinking about once you get an understanding of geologic timescale, you basically might go to bed thinking about when life crawled onto land, what was going on 2 billion years ago on the surface of the earth, a whole lot of nothing. Probably just various little bacterial mats and what the shit. Maybe you'll go to bed thinking about what the forests that laid down most of the planet's coal looked like, that kind of thing. Long extinct forms of organisms, both plant and animal, that we only know from fossils, and many more which we'll never know existed because they never fossilized, or the fossils haven't been found yet. So anyway, learning about geology made me fall in love with the world again. I could look at a road cut and read what it meant, and I could know what the rock I was looking at was and what it implied. I.e., this was an ancient ocean, or this was the scene of a quite likely violent volcanic eruption. This was a slab of rock that was slapped onto the side of the continent by a subducting oceanic plate, and much like a piece of spackling paste onto a slab of drywall. But most importantly, learning about geology gives us a way to take us out of ourselves. Learning about geology is almost like taking good psychedelics, like good but harmless psychedelics. It's utterly humbling. It leaves you with a feeling of how insignificant you are, but in the most incredible and beautiful way. It kind of takes you out of your own ego. To learn to think of what came before you and what will come after, and just how immense and vast the long, slow crawl of time is here on Earth. Gives you a little perspective, It kind of gets you to zoom out. Take a look at the bigger picture, It's also beautiful, and it makes all the petty shit in your life and all the world easier to not choke on. So, once you learn about the geologic time scale, shit like that, you'll never think of time the same way again. Okay, so you can see I got the desk all prepped for you. I got the racks. I got a lot of rocks. I'm always grabbing rocks. Look, a nice big piece of granite, All right, and that's not for beating anybody in the head. It's just for showing you dicks, what's going on here. I even got some fossils. Got a 500-million-year-old trilobite cephalon from the Mojave Desert. Got a nice piece of quartz. I got a metasequoia fossil I picked up in Oregon. I got some obsidian right there. I got some, what they like to call pa-oi-oi, but I pronounce pa-ho-ho because I like the way it sounds. It kind of sounds like a tacky, one of the tacky pastries, pa-ho-ho. But, and it's just basically, again, this is an extrusive igneous rock. It's just lava that was very iron-rich, somewhat mafic, you would call it, for magnesium and iron. And then, of course, cooled rather quickly, at least rather quickly as opposed to this granite on the surface of the earth. Okay, but we'll get into that later. Extrusive igneous and intrusive igneous. Now, the big thing you want to do, you want to get this, you get the handy tablet you buy used from Jeff Bezos' creepy ass for $90. You get it on Amazon. I tend to go with Android because, again, Apple's proprietary, and fuck them. I don't really like using Apple anything. But you do whatever you want. The same apps will be available, tend to be available on both Android and Apple. Now, what you want to do over there, see, I already got it prepped up. This thing's a fucking pain in my ass. Anyway, you download this app called Rocked, okay? R-O-C-K without the E, R-O-C-K apostrophe D. I don't know why they did it like that. They're trying to be cute, all right? The app hasn't been updated in about a year, but it's still a fucking great app. Now, basically, all Rocked is it's, look, I just clicked on a random piece by accident, a random piece on that map. It's an overlay of geologic maps onto maps of the United States, but it even works in Australia, it works in Mexico. Now, the data is going to be different depending on who's collecting it. Basically, it's just an aggregation of data of whatever rock type is exposed at the surface of the Earth. Okay, here is an analog version of what rock is. Okay, and again, that's ROCK''D. And if you know the developers of that app, tell them to get their shit together and basically stop, make it so that it stops recentering the thing on wherever your location is. Because I'll be looking at like New Caledonia, and it'll just all of a sudden the middle of the app will put me back on wherever I am, and a fucking coffee shop and wherever the fucking, it's super annoying. Anyway, I digress. This is an analog version of what the app Rocked is. It's just a geologic map, and you can see all the faults in there. Every different color code here basically is you could go up to the key up there, you could see it's applied to a different kind of rock, whether it's metamorphic, sedimentary, extrusive igneous. Now, these don't normally, at least on this one, they don't normally give the age. Rocked will give you the age of the rock you're looking at. You just got to click at it. So like if we're looking at that app Rocked, I'll click on this little purple's the serpentine. I'll click, maybe the blue is the serpentine. I think the purple's the serpentine. So I'll click on that little piece of serpentine. It'll tell me how old the rock is, and then it'll give me a link to a whole bunch of papers and what it's made out of. Interesting thing to note here, too, about this geologic map, especially in the case of California. If you're in Kansas or something, you're just going to get a bunch of ocean sediments. Mostly ocean sediments, old marine sediments, limestones and shit like that, but maybe you'll get a couple different anomalies. I don't think there's any granite. California obviously has it all. You see there's the Garlock Fault. There's the San Andreas Fault. San Andreas runs all the way up, true up there to Point Reyes. And the interesting thing to note here is that the red is granite. Okay, the red is granite. You got granite here. The whole Sierra Nevada obviously is granite. You get a little bit of granite up there in the Klamath Siskiyou ranges, and then you get a little bit of granite here. You might be interesting to note, of course, that this granite being directly on the west side, abutting the fault on the west side, this granite, of course, was all moved up from down here by the San Andreas Fault. Only took about 35 million years, maybe less in some cases, for this to get up here. But all this granite originally started down here. The North American plates going south, Pacific plates going north at a rate of about roughly 35 millimeters a year. So that's you could just, there you go, right between a 3 and a 4 right there, which is actually pretty fast. But there's even continental, there's tectonic plates that move faster than that. So anyway, just to explain this to you, really, we'll get back to, you could figure out what the fuck I'm talking about. I'll get back to it later. But basically, all the granite that's up there, you get some granite up at Point Reyes. It was all brought up by movement along the San Andreas Fault from way down south. And this is why it's so interesting to learn how to read these maps, to know what they mean, to know what they imply, to know what the fuck the rock you're standing on is. These are all obviously alluvial sediments in the Central Valley. The pink up there is all volcanic. That's because most of northeastern California is volcanic. The purple, of course, is the serpentine, occurring in a generally northwest to southeast trending band along the state line. Basically, not the state line, along the length of the state. Basically because there used to be a subducting plate going beneath, and I'll explain what the hell all this means to you in a minute. A subducting plate going beneath the continental plate, and it just basically slapped that shit on there, just by accretion. Now, of course, an actual geologist might take issue with what I'm saying, but if you get the general gist, the general idea, you're a step ahead of most. Most average schmucks walking around with no idea of, what the bedrock is in their area or how it got there. They don't know what the fuck they're looking at when they look at a road cut. There's no context for their own life, their own meager human life. And I think having a meager life as a human is a wonderful thing. It's very humbling, gives you a bigger perspective of how you're a small piece of a much bigger picture. Again, that aside, at least you'll have a step ahead among most of the average schmucks on the street. Again, look at what's going on in the Mojave. Some of the oldest rocks in California are in the Mojave. Some of these old limestones and shit. Really, 500 million year old limestones. Where I got that trilobite from was somewhere. Where the hell was it? Somewhere down here. Just really, really, really old rocks. Pink is obviously really, really new rocks. Typically 20 million years old or less. That's very recent in geologic time. And, of course, the granites are old, but they were uplifted relatively recently, in quotes. Anyway, I'll show you what the fuck all this means. We'll talk about tectonic plates. Okay, so they got a lot of, stupid apps out there, shit that'll, rub you around, slap you around, make you pancakes, put a little puppy dog face on a selfie. If you take about 9,000 selfies, you can get 9,000 different corny-ass animal faces you can put on there anyway. But there's a lot of good stuff on here, too, of course. So here's another app. They got an app for this, of course, for the tectonic plate movement. Look at this. It's called, I don't even know who, I think some Russian guy developed it. Lithospheric plates, all right? And that's a good one. Just basically loads you a map, a tectonic map, okay? I'll give you a little bit of context. Now, unfortunately, it's not a glorious, massive tectonic map like that, or, let's see, like this. But it'll get you close. Here you go. Now, this is where the magic happens, okay? Basically, what you got to understand is there are seafloor spreading centers, which are basically where new oceanic crust comes out, and there are subduction zones where the oceanic crust eventually goes down. Oceanic crust only exists roughly about 200 million years, and before it gets subducted again. So it's coming up here at the seafloor spreading centers. Half goes this way, half goes this way, and then it subducts down in a trench. And the interesting thing to note is wherever it subducts down in a trench, where you have an oceanic plate subducting beneath the a continental plate, right? Because you got the continental plates, they're always on the surface. They're much lighter than the oceanic plates, much less dense, so they kind of float. All the granites and shit. Whereas the basalts, which is what the oceanic plates are made out of, basalts are pretty heavy. They got the iron in them, the magnesium, etc. They tend to stay down low. So the continental plates are kind of floating around on top of the continental crust, kind of floating around an oceanic crust. And then, of course, the oceanic crust eventually gets subducted. So seafloor spreading center and subduction zones. Those are the two keywords I want you to learn here. Seafloor spreading centers, i.e. another word for that is divergent boundary, and a subduction zone, which is a convergent boundary. Convergent boundaries are not always subduction zones, though, such as in the case of India, where it's hitting into where India's running into China. You get the Himalayas going up there. There's no subduction zone there. It's a convergent boundary. But anyway, so that's that. But you got to really, to get this, you normally think of the world in terms of continents. Start thinking of it, or start having the ability to think of it in terms of tectonic plates, because this really will fuck up your reality and just make you understand the world in a new way. And that's the other thing too. Subduction zones, of course, are always associated with where a subducting plate goes beneath the continental plate. They're always associated with volcanoes. So the volcanoes you get in the Cascades, again, you got the Juan de Fuca plate subducting beneath the North American plate, and then down here, in the Andes, you got the Nazca plate subducting beneath the South American plate, etc. And then, of course, just over here, it's just a giant fucking mishmash, in Southeast Asia of subduction zones and trenches and what this shit. Here you got, one oceanic plate subducting beneath another oceanic plate. Just a fucking melan. I don't even know what's going on over there. I probably shouldn't open my mouth on that, but it's the deepest trenches are over there. So tectonic maps are real important to get a understanding of. They dictate where volcanoes are. Now you get Yellowstone is not a subducting plate, of course, and the Yellowstone is just what you call a hotspot volcano. Same with Hawaii, just random errant places where magma bubbles up to the surface. Doesn't really bubble up; it kind of gently rises. And anyway, that's a whole nother story. But subduction zones are one of the main causes of volcanism. So it's either a subduction zone or it's a hot spot. Most often the case, it's a subduction zone. And so, one more thing to note too is that here's the San Andreas Fault. The San Andreas Fault is quite an anomaly for planet Earth. It's what's called a transform fault. You get just two plates sliding past each other, not one subducting beneath the other. Now up here, just north of where the San Andreas goes in, up there by Humboldt County, etc., up into Seattle and shit, that you get the Juan de Fuca plate, which is actually subducting. All right, and before the San Andreas existed, maybe 50 million years ago, there was what you had there was called the Farallon plate, and that was subducting beneath the North American plate. But once the Farallon plate fully subducted, fully went under, then that's when the San Andreas opened up think San Andreas is roughly about 35 million years old, you know? And of course, these are all, like the San Andreas, these are all transform faults too. The seafloor spreading center. Because like seams on a baseball, you know, the Earth is a globe. You can't just have a suture going straight up. It's got to occur basically, you know, like stitches. You know, and that's why you get that kind of zigzag pattern. And again, you got the magma coming out. Half goes this way, half goes that way. The U.S. Navy actually discovered this, I think, in the 1940s when they were mapping magnetism on the ocean floor. You know, they were dragging a thing that detected a magnetic charge, and you know, you get magnetic reversals every 10,000, 12, 20,000, however many years. And so the rock, the magma, as it cools, would have the magnetic charge of planet Earth at that time. You know, and then of course when it would change 10, 20,000 years later, it would be different. So when you drag a magnet east to west across the, you know, this whole section of oceanic crust that's come out of this seafloor spreading center, you get a stripe, like a zebra stripe. And that was how they kind of figured out that old Alfred Wegener knew what he was talking about, you know. Or he was a German guy in the 20s who figured out plate tectonics. But obviously, you know, you got some nice videos on him that do him more justice than my silly ass could, but you get the gist of it. So again, the best thing to do to understand all this stuff, you want to dig a little bit deeper, just buy a used, this was like $12 on the internet, you know. Buy a used geology textbook. It'll get you a crash course and all this shit. They even got nice little cross sections. See? Look at that. You can see where a convergent boundary, where the oceanic plate's going beneath the continental plate, and as the plate descends, the magma, you get magma rising due to mixing with water, a lower density, etc., and coming up in the form of volcanoes. You know, you get the seafloor spreading center. Now, you rarely get seafloor spreading centers going on to land, except up there. Obviously, you know, Iceland's got a lot of shit going on. They got, you know, active seafloor spreading centers on land. You can see active magma eruption. You know, and again, this is all part of just convection currents within the Earth. Which I think if I could find a nice diagram here to show you, they got a really nice You like pictures? Do you like pictures? Does it make it easier for you to learn this shit? They don't got a nice diagram of the convection currents, but just like water in a pot comes up at one point, you know, the magma comes up at one point, cools down, forms crust, then spreads as more magma, you know, moves to the east or the west, whatever, as more magma comes up, and then of course it descends again. And when that downward part of the convection current is of course the subduction zone going back into the mantle, you know, at a subduction zone at a convergent plate boundary and with the shit. But you know, this is physical geology. This is one I just picked up just to get a quick refresher to make this fucking corny video for you. There's also Essentials of Geology. Any of those. You can get them on LibGen if you're cheap. You don't want to buy a used textbook, whatever. But you know, this is important shit to learn. I mean, this is your fucking world. This is the planet you live on, and it dictates everything. You know, plate tectonics dictate why certain animals are distributed in a certain region, you know. Obviously, there was an affinity. One of the big ways they figured this out was an affinity between fossils on the western part of the African continent and the eastern part of South America. You see, they fit right together, you know, pretty good. It's been about 90 million years since they were together, but, you know. And then, of course, you got over there the Arabian Plate, that the Rift Valley right there, of course, is opening up. That's going to be a much larger ocean at some point in time. Australia's moving north. Australia used to be down south, connected to Antarctica, as did South America. That's why you have an affinity between marsupials, plant life, reptiles, etc. That you know, they've been separated for 50 million years since these two plates moved away from Antarctica, but at one point they were together, and that's why you get that's why you have affinities in the flora and the fucking fossils and the etc. So anyway, you get the gist. It's really important shit to learn. We'll start talking about rock. Okay, so real quick, there's three main rock types. If you take anything away from this, aside from the plate tectonics, all that shit, just gotta remember there's three main rock types, okay? You got basically igneous. Granite is an igneous. Obsidian is an igneous. And just meaning it cooled from a liquid state, okay? And then you got sedimentary. Obviously, you only find fossils in sedimentary rock. There's that trilobite cephalon, roughly 500 million years old. This is basically a shale, a mudstone. It's been compressed a little bit. Here's another, here's that, it's kind of chalky. I think it's mostly volcanic ash, but it was, obviously laid down, and sediment. It was a deposit of volcanic ash and laid down, and it obviously preserved whatever else got stuck in there, like this metasequoia leaf. And then, of course, here's limestone. This is the western limestone, the tear paints limestone. You can see little bits of corals and sea fans and crinoids and shit in there. I think this is from New Mexico. But so that's sedimentary. And then you got metamorphic. The metamorphic is basically just cooked rocks, okay? It's just pre-existing rocks that were heated at pressure, at depth and you add a little bit of depth and a little bit of heat, pressure and temperature, and you cook them, and you get alterations to their chemistry and a crystalline structure, etc. All right, so it's you basically melt them a little bit. Actually, I don't think you melt them. I think just think of it as cooked rocks, metamorphic. Good way to think of this is think of like you cook limestone enough, it'll become marble. You cook sandstone, it'll become quartzite. You cook shale. You cook the shale. If you cook this up, you'd destroy the fossil in there, but you would make slate. There's varying grades, actually, of this sedimentary rock. You could make shale. You could make phyllites. You could make slate. You could make slate. You could make phyllites. You could make what's like a high grade? What's the high grade metamorphic? I'll have to put this in notes because I'm having a fucking brain conk out right now. But basically, it just depends. You get different names for the rocks depending on what grade, i.e., how much you leave the rock in the oven for. The figurative oven of being buried in at depth, or being in close proximity to a plug of magma that comes up, or a plume of magma that comes up and heats the rock. Just basically something to heat the rock. It could be, it's most often depth and pressure, but it can also be magma. But all you got to know is it's cooked rock, and it alters the rock, tends to generally make it harder, and it alters its crystal structure, etc. Okay, I had to look it up because I forgot for a minute. But basically, the different grades of metamorphism go from slate to phyllite to schist to gneiss. Gneiss is very hard. That's nice with a G, N-E-I-S-S, not nice as in, oh, look at that, that's so nice. Often said sarcastically if you're in the Chicago tri-state area. But anyway, moving on from metamorphism, we're going to focus on igneous rocks because that's the real important shit. And that's most of what you see on all over the earth. I mean, you get just basically a thin layer of sedimentary rocks, and then most of the shit you see is this stuff. It's the granites. It's the basically everything composed of silicates, granites, and lava. Okay, this has less silica in it than this. They got a little chart over here, and on one end of the chart you got roughly 70% silica, and on the other side you got roughly 40% silica. It's technically silica dioxide, silicon with oxygen. Sometimes you got 4 oxygen. I don't know. There's a whole other. You got to look that thing up. I can't help you with that there. I'm a shitty chemist. But it's basically a combination of silica and oxygen. Okay, and of course, going from intrusive igneous rocks. So you got sedimentary, metamorphic, igneous. And then you got intrusive igneous rocks, extrusive igneous rocks. Intrusive just means it cooled in the Earth's crust at depth and pressure, and it cooled very slowly. And then extrusive igneous just means it cooled very fast, often on the surface or close to the surface of the Earth. Now, the thing to pay attention to with speaking of silica, look at a nice brick of quartz right there. Anyway, the thing to pay attention to with the intrusive igneous rocks is they always, you'll see people referring to things like grain size. What grain size is basically the crystal grain. You could see it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to explain unless you're, I guess you got a rock in front of you. But you could see there's little crystals in there. It's basically crystal structure. Whereas over here, there's almost nothing. You could see a little bit of something, but or here, look at this piece of gabbro, another intrusive igneous rock. Got this in Baja. You could see large crystals in there. You could see see all the shimmery bullshit, I mean, you obviously, I'm not being too eloquent here with the articulation of my words, but if you look at a fucking piece of granite, you can tell the difference between a piece of granite and obviously, a volcanic rock like rhyolite or andesite, which is a much tinier grain size. So you gotta know what the fuck grain size is if you're trying to understand igneous rocks. Okay, and then of course you get something like obsidian that has no grain size at all because it cooled way too fast. It's glass, cooled way too fast for there to be any crystal size. But again, silica, it's just high silica. And so you get this little, basically this little, where the fuck is it? We'll find this. There you go. This classification chart for the most common igneous rocks. You got granite. You got the basically intrusive version right here, aka the phaneritic, meaning it's got the large grain size, aka the coarse grain size. And then you got the aphanitic, the fine grain size, like rhyolite and andesite and volcanic rocks. So the good way to read this is read phaneritic as intrusive igneous rocks, i.e. cooling at depth and pressure deep into earth, or aphanitic, cooling rather rapidly, often in a volcanic eruption or extruded onto the surface very gently like basalt, in Hawaii. And again, the big thing to pay attention to is as you go east on this chart, you get declining levels of silica and more magnesium and more iron. And as you go to the west, i.e. the left, you get more silica, basically a higher percentage of silica. So roughly 70% on this side, 40% on this side. And all my favorite rocks, I like the granites too, but my favorite rocks tend to be the ones that are high in magnesium and iron. Really interesting. That's where you get serpentine. Serpentine, of course, causes speciation in plants, and it's what you call ultramafic. Mafic just standing for magnesium, and iron, remember, Fe is the chemical abbreviation for iron. Okay, so felsic, high silica, intermediate. Hey, you got an intermediate level of silica. Mafic, okay, you're getting a little bit less silica, a little bit more iron, a little bit more magnesium, and then ultramafic. Holy shit, you rarely get those types of rocks on the surface of the earth. That's when you get a lot of the cool plant speciation, because a lot of these rocks are quite toxic to plants. They don't have much calcium or nitrogen. They got a lot more magnesium and iron. Okay, but this is, igneous rocks are everywhere. Growing up in Chicago, I didn't see that many igneous rocks. You get a couple of the granites up north in Wisconsin and shit, but not many. It's all limestone. You go once you get below that rich prairie topsoil, you get to the bedrock. It's all limestone. It's all, Silurian limestone. It's all Devonian limestone, 420 million year old limestone. Real old shit, interesting, cool fossils, but it's not the intrusive igneous rocks. It's not the good, juicy, nutrient-rich rocks that once they break down make a real nice soil, add a lot of nitrogen and, not nitrogen, other minerals, that basically plants can use, shit like that. I love the intrusive igneous rocks. So anyway, that's what you got to do, basically. Just get one of these books that just, it'll just give you basically a crash course into looking at rocks a little bit harder, understanding what they mean, understanding what the fuck grain size is. There's some nice grain size on there. See, on this granite, diorite intermediate, gabbro, same thing I got going on right here. This large grain size, and then of course, see, there's andesite. If you look up close, even on there, you can see there's grains in there. Okay, you could tell it's an igneous rock, but it's obviously extrusive igneous because those grains are so small. They cooled really fast. They didn't have time to cool slowly and get big like the crystal grains in granite or in diorite. So anyway, there you go. I'm a shitty geologist. Hopefully you gained a little bit insight into this. You got a little bit of, maybe you get a different way of looking at a road cut. You say you're in central Missouri or some shit, and you're going through those massive road cuts of fucking gray rock. You don't know what they were, and you find out they're 400 million year old limestone. Download that app, Rocked. Download the Tectonic map if you give a shit, because again, Tectonics explain the biogeography of different plants and animals you might be interested in. Get yourself a physical geology. You could get this $10. What are you doing? You're gonna sit. Hey, go on a lunch break or some shit. You're gonna just stare at your phone, look at pictures of butts or food or some shit. Break out a little fucking, one of the used tablets and start reading physical geology. Read about, teach yourself a thing or two instead of just sitting there like a useless fuck, looking at pictures of somebody else's lunch. I don't know. What do people look at on their phones half the time? Because, you know, my silly ass, I'm always generally trying to read Wikipedia articles or fucking news. I just have this addiction to information. I don't know. I see other people staring at stuff. I don't know what they're doing, getting likes or, you know, maybe they're looking at asses. I just assume everyone's horny and lonely all the time. Maybe they're just looking at asses. Anyway, learning about this stuff will fuck up your reality in the most beautiful of ways. It'll make you in love with the world again, excited. It'll make you want to travel and just, it really does. It opens your eyes. And again, we didn't even get into the geologic timescale. You get into that, you'll understand where you fit into the much bigger picture. It'll give you a little insight into your own being. There's the real fucking origin story there, huh? Why don't you put down your King James and pick up your fucking John McPhee, you prick, huh? Or your Physical Geology by Plummer. It's kind of a nice name. I wish my last name was Plummer. Anyway, what the fuck? Anyway, that's all I got for you right now. I guess you could leave me some mean comments or some shit, or just give me some feedback. Maybe I know this was long and drawn out, but I'm trying to talk about the fucking history of the earth, and you want me to do it in 6 minutes? All right, that's all I got for you now. Go fuck yourself. Bye.